So, Mihails, please explain me in Latvian, why did you mix it twice?
I mixed it twice because you told me mix it twice. Okay.
Correct answer.
Yeah. Pēc, tā teikt, ražotāja instrukcijas mēs maisam ar diviem piegājieniem. Ja? Kā es jau teicu sākumā, mēs sākumā samaisām visu javu pirmo reizi, tad mums jāiedot laiku javai uzbriest, un tad viegli pārmaisam otro reizi, pirms mēs sākam ar to strādāt. Usually this step is skipped to mix 2 times. Maybe you can tell about the risks, what could happen if you don't use it properly or...
After the first mixing, actually what happens is that all those polymers and additives that you have in the render starts melting with the water that you add. But that means that this render itself in the bucket is after 10 minutes it's not like homogeneous. It's not the same all over. Therefore, the second mixing, exactly the way as Mihails did it, like only like 30 seconds is enough, is to just get all the material to be exactly the same. Okay. So yeah, that's actually 5 minutes is enough in case of 310 because we don't have so many additives here. If you are using tile adhesives or something, then it's more important to have a little bit longer waiting time between the mixings.
Kā Marta jau teica vairākas reizes savā prezentācijā, mums jāsasniedz 5 mm slāni, un to mēs tagad mēģināsim izdarīt, izmantojot dažādā izmērā špakteļlapstas ar dažādiem zobiem. Jā, pie Marti tur ir 12 mm zobs, man ir 8, bet šo es izmantošu tikai, lai uznestu materiālu uz virsmas. So while I'm trying to put it on, maybe you can say a couple of words.
First of all, one step that we are not doing today, which is not mandatory by our guidelines, but what is mandatory by some competitors' guidelines, and what is a step that very often companies do is actually the first very thin layer that they apply on the mineral wool. This is only on the mineral wool. It's not necessary on EPS, and this is the so-called scratch layer. So first of all, they very often have this so thin as you can do basically, and they let it dry. So this is not considered as the first base coat layer yet. We are skipping that right now. Because, as I said, we don't actually say that it's mandatory. So what Mihails is now doing, he's trying to apply our minimum requirement, 5 mm of base coat. He's trying to apply it in a way that we always suggested to do, so-called wet on wet, which means that he has to apply now enough base coat render to have the mesh inside it. In a minute I'm going to talk about where the mesh should be in this layer. After that he has to apply the second layer of base coat render on top of that mesh immediately. That's the wet on wet working progress that we always suggest to use. It's not always possible on very big job sites, but this is something that we strongly recommend to do. So what he's doing right now is applying the first base coat. He's just applying the material on the mineral wool, trying to have it enough there to have this 5
mm
thick enough layer under. No, not yet 5 mm. You want to have thick enough layer under the mesh. So where the mesh should be is so that if you have 5 mm, let's take 6 mm, it's easier to calculate. 6 mm of the base coat thickness altogether. Then maybe somebody knows already where the mesh should be in this layer. Or what do you think? You're showing me something, but in the middle. In the middle of base coat or in the middle of the whole render layer with the decorative render. This is not correct. It should be behind the outer 1/3. So if you're watching from insulation side, then you should have 4 millimeters under the mesh and 2 millimeters on top of the mesh. So you should have 1/3 on top of the mesh and 2/3 beneath the mesh. And now if you apply decorative render, then the mesh should be approximately in the middle. So you weren't actually completely wrong in that answer. Yeah. Let's say you have decorative render up to on top of that 6 millimeter base coat, you have 8 millimeters altogether, and then you have the mesh exactly in the middle.
And you can wondering where usually it is.
Years ago, it was always basically touching the insulation material. Nowadays, when we have talked about it that much, then I can say that in Estonia, it's quite often maybe even too much in the outer layer, because everybody tries to get this mesh out as possible. Yeah, and that's sometimes a problem. So, Mihail's...
Maybe about sizes you can
yes,
say a couple of words.
I was watching which tool you were using. I was hoping you to fail there, but you didn't. Yeah. He had this base coat right now just applied in one layer, but right now the layer is very uneven. To have it even surface, what he's doing, he's using this trowel with 12 millimeter
12.
notches. So he's trying to have it now to remove the excessive material. And now we get to this point where we very often see that they don't do it correct.
Yeah.
Right now, I would say that you have it too much in 90 degrees. It should be quite like this, like 30 degrees or something. Okay. Because right now, when he's having it like almost 90 degrees, he's removing too much material. Right now, what he's doing is that basically in the bottom of this groove, he has almost nothing. And on the top of this groove, he has almost 12 millimeters. And what they are doing very often is that they apply mesh now on top of that, which means that underneath the mesh there are
some
gaps, and basically you have the contact surface only like 50%. And later, when we do those cutout tests to measure the layer thickness when it's already dried, then sometimes we can see those gaps in those specimens, and that's also
I'm sure we will see it because I tried to do it.
So right now he tried to do it as good as he can with this 12 millimeter trowel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one more just to put the accent. The angle should be about 60.
I will even have it more smoother, actually. Something like that.
Something
okay. Because I don't want to scrub off everything from the bottom.
Yes.
If you have it more angled, then this upper layer will be a little bit thinner and less, but that's okay. So anyways, 12 millimeter is, in my opinion, absolutely minimum, this trowel size that you can use to have this 5 millimeter.
Jā, tas,
better to use 15 millimeter.
Jāizmanto pēc iespējas lielāku to zobu izmēru. Īstenībā vakar man neizdevās atrast neko lielāku par 12 mm mūsu veikalā, tad tāda veida instrumentiem. Bet, kā teica Mārtī, 12 ir absolūtais minimums, lai izveidotu pirmo slāni, uz kuru mēs pēc tam vēlāk iestrādātu sietu, lai tas atbilstu tām nosacījumam, ka siets atrodas ārējā biezuma trešdaļa. Ja? Tad.
Okay, so if we do a little math right now, he had it almost 90 degrees angle, 12 millimeter trowel. So basically what he did was that in the bottom he has nothing, and upper part is right now, let's say 10 millimeter or something like that. Yeah. And now he does the second step, starts to smoothen it horizontally. You can start doing that. Yeah. So basically now what he does, he divides the layer thickness that he has right now by 2. He will fill the gaps. So mathematically, theoretically, this 10 millimeter in the higher parts right now should get him half of that. That means 5 millimeter layer thickness. What really happens is that he's, with every movement, he's removing material. So that's the place where the applicators usually are doing their miscalculation. They say that, oh, I'm using 12 millimeter, it's impossible, do the math. By the end of the day, they have like 3.2 millimeter altogether. And that's a fact. Just measured yesterday. So right now, I think that I see visually that on the lower part somehow you have a little bit thicker, but yes, on the upper part you have only a few millimeters. But this is extremely important step that he's doing right now. That he didn't sink the mesh on top of those grooves that we had, but he's smoothing the surface and now sinking the mesh. So sink the mesh and then we can do the cutout test tomorrow and see how you did.
Jā,
are you hired or not?
Akcentēšu par to, ko teica Martija, tas ir svarīgi. Parasti arī mēs redzam objektos, ka atstāj tas rieviņas un uz tam rieviņam iestrādā sietu. Ja? Tas nebūtu pareizi, jo tad paliek gaisa kabatiņas, kas nav pieņemami, lai sasniegtu kvalitatīvu ārmešanas slāni. Un tāpēc tas rieviņas pirms sieta iestrādes vajag izlīdzināt. Usually I also see that you ask me to do it horizontally, but sometimes I see that they use vertical stripes and do it the same vertical leveling. How big mistake is this?
In that case, you will remove more material. Even more material.
Even more. So it's much more.
Because you have to squeeze more to fill the gaps.
Yeah.
Therefore, always, whenever we have whatever solution we have where you need the even substrate and so it's layer thickness, you always do it vertically and then horizontally or vice versa, whatever, but you will just have to do it.
Vēl par tam rieviņam, kas arī gribēju akcentēt par to, ka ja mums iestrādāta jāva ar vertikālam rieviņam, tad mēs to izlīdzinām tikai horizontāli. Ja, ir redzēts, kā dara arī tāpat ar vertikālam kustībām, kas it kā sanāk, bet tajā pašā laikā, kā saka Marti, mēs noņemam vēl vairāk materiāla ar tādu virzienu. Ja? Tad, ja mums ir iestrādātas vertikālas rieviņas, tad mēs horizontāli izlīdzinām, vai no otrādi, ja ir horizontāli iestrādāts, tad vertikāli izlīdzinām.
So, now is time to push the mesh inside. And this is another place where usually construction companies are making a mistake. So, they are still mathematicians, they had this 12 millimeter trowel, with what they always guarantee at least 6 millimeter render in their opinion, which is not the case, as we have already seen because of two different reasons by now. Then they think that they put this mesh on top of that layer, that all those 6 millimeters that they have right now will be beneath the mesh. Actually, what you are seeing here, he's when he starts working with the trowel or floater, then he starts first of all pushing the mesh inside, more closer to the insulation, and also what he is always doing whenever you are doing something on top of the render, you're always removing a little bit material. Uh, 310 is quite coarse material. It has up to 1 millimeter grain size and it has extremely long fiber mesh inside. So it's up to 6 millimeter microfiber that it has inside. So if you are having this quite coarse render with long fibers in only like 2-3 millimeter layer thickness, then it's impossible to get this render coming through the mesh with that step, and as we can see, Mihails is already struggling.
Yes, I just wanted to put the accent on that place where we left this air gap, and at that moment I see that I also try to more liquid mortar put in this place to fill in the holes, as we say.
Yes, yeah, that's another mistake.
Another mistake.
To start applying now the render on top of that, because they are not able to squeeze the render below through the mesh.
Through the mesh, yeah. Okay. So if during our work we feel that mortar from mesh goes not really good, this is a signal that beneath we have very thin layer.
Very thin layer is one opportunity. Other opportunity is that they have waited too long. It has already dried.
Yes.
So that can also be the reason.
Okay, and before the application of the second leveling layer,
you shouldn't see the mesh.
You shouldn't see the mesh. Yeah.
You can see the structure as we see here.
As we see it
this
here,
is
yeah.
absolutely fine, but you can't see the color of the mesh. So I have visited the job site where it was already tried out. They wanted to apply the second layer, and it looked, in the good places, it looked like that.
Yeah.
In the worst places, it looked like
that. Yeah.
Like that, basically. And they said, oh, no problem, I put it through this mesh.
Okay, I have to achieve that I don't see the mesh with a layer of beneath.
You can't see the color of the mesh, that's the easiest way to remember.
Yes. Or I have to add the mortar now and try to hide it. No, I have to use that mortar that is there. Okay, that's one more point.
If you apply render on top of that, then probably you will have a lack of adhesion in that place.
Okay.
And if you are not able to have it, then basically the easiest way is to pull out the mesh and apply more render beneath the mesh.
Again.
Yeah. And when you have done it a few times, then you learn, because you don't want to do that again. And most important part is to drop render all the time, I see.
Yeah.
Because the factories are working and the trucks are driving, so we want to sell.
Do it at least every 30 seconds.
So yeah, that's actually not the case with the base coat render usually, but that's the case with decorative render. Right now Mihails did a small job there and he did it quite clean. But on a job site, very often you have this complaint that the consumption is too big, and when you visit the job site, you see that there's like half a bucket is beneath the socle area, and half the bucket is on the wall, and there's your answer to the high consumption. So, but first step, well done. Almost.
Almost.
You missed few spots there, but
Yes.
yeah, usually when you're first pushing the mesh inside, then it's easy to use this one-hand trowel to just get it stuck so it doesn't move anymore, and then it's easier to use this wider trowel to just pull it in.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Bet šitā vieta, ja tu redz, ka te ir balta, tad tu ar jaunu var paņemt un aizpildīt?
Nē, tev jāizmanto tā java, kas ir apakšā.
Bet ja nav?
Ja nav, tad noņem sietu, pārtaisi. Un tas ir labāk nekā atstāt viņu tukšu. Jā, bet tev...
Jaunu ne?
Jaunu ne.
Now what, Mihails?
Yes, maybe now I finally can use this 8mm trowel to put another.
Yeah, layer. Usually the second layer, as far as I've seen on the job sites, they don't use the trowel anymore. Because if you are doing it wet and wet, if you're doing it on the next day, then they are using the trowel. So because if you are doing it with wet and wet, then you might harm the mesh. You can exactly the mesh can be stuck on those notches, and then you will just remove it, and then it's a bigger problem. So because that's quite thin layer, then usually guys are quite good to feel it that the layer thickness is even all over the facade. I'm not sure is Mihails that professional, but
absolutely not.
But the guys who have graduated this school and working on a job site every day, they usually are. Because this layer thickness now should be only like 2 millimeters. That's fine and enough.
And we shouldn't see even the structure of the mesh?
Yes, in that case not.
A question about connecting stripes of mesh.
Yes, if you
put it underneath, you put it over.
If you are proceeding with the next mesh, then you should have at least minimum 10 millimeter overlap here. Yeah.
When we need
10 centimeter.
10 centimeter.
Yeah.
I said millimeter?
Yeah.
Pardon, 10 centimeters, yeah. Usually the mesh has this shown here, the 10 centimeter area.
When we need to put this mesh before this layer? Before...
No, you apply this and then you come with this right like few minutes later.
Okay.
Yeah. If you are going to leave it overnight like this, then you should leave out 10 centimeter of free mesh, which you can overlap tomorrow.
Okay. And even more than shouldn't be beneath, yeah? It's just absolutely free?
Yeah, absolutely free.
Free mesh, okay.
And,
sometimes they forget it, and this is a big problem. Then they have to do the whole facade over again.
When you see it, that place where it's...
Yeah. If you have enough render, then you can squeeze 2 layers of mesh through the mortar. That's okay. You don't have to like add extra. If you add extra, then you will have a visible line on the facade. The layer thickness will be bigger. When this job is done and it has dried, then what we do is that we measure the layer thickness with a very simple test.